Good afternoon, everybody. Spectre here. How we doing? It is Friday now, the 6th day of November. A couple days now past the elections. We're going to have a lot to discuss here this afternoon. All the developments in that have happened since we last met, even since Pixels was on last night with his show, Stormwatch, some of the goings on. Like I said, a lot to discuss here this afternoon. I think I've got at least a couple dozen articles in that to get to here. And that is, folks, I tell you, just a small snippet of what I could provide. But for the sake of time, obviously, we don't want to be here all day. So I think just the select few in that I have are probably some of the best ones that I've come across. But just know that there is a hell of a lot more out there by way of the steel that is open, that is transparent, and right out in the open for all to see. Before I get into all that, though, I do want to thank everybody for joining here. I got a couple, about 125 of you or so over on the YouTube side, and I'll take a quick spin through there, see who all's in chat. Looks like Lynn Jones, 250, one of our super fans from across the pond. Good to have you aboard. David Gregg, Brent Blackwell, Miss Jamie, see Lee Rocks, Don Rose, Simon Shears, R3DP1LL, Red Pill, all right, Lee Rocks, 10AJ Keckwrangle, some of our regulars out there as well, Lisa Mayer, let's see, Sparta Beer Reviews, Sparta Beer, good to see you, Simon Shears, oh, and a few more of you, Maureen Green, etc., John Alberto, and of course, over on the D Live side, we've got about, it looks like about 80 to 100 of you guys over there as well. Go, dog, go, shaking her tail as usual. Good to see you. Cheb, CBABSSR in Biblical Smackdown. Leonard Hopper, good to see you guys as well. Thank you for the diamonds. Thank you for the donations throughout. If I don't get to, I apologize again. Just for the simple fact I have got so stinking much on the plate here. It's tough to watch 50 different things all at once. So I'll just apologize in advance and try and hit you guys toward the end here. For those that do donate, we do appreciate the donations, and we will continue to bring you the news as we find it. Also, over on Twitch TV, Chris Schaus, there we go. Good to see you hanging out over there. Looks to be like you're the lone soldier over there at the moment. So do remember that we do have alternative platforms both here on DLive .tv under 5x5, and then over on twitch.tv FIVEBY5. You can find us over there. All right, so that being said, let's get into the shenanigans and that have been playing out since we last met. And let's see here if this cooperates. There we go. All right, so again, as I've stated from the beginning here, I am using 270 to win. Oh boy. There we go. Man, oh man. I got way too much stuff open, I think. We'll have to see how this plays out. 270 to win is what I'm using here for the election maps and that. And as of right now, it is showing Biden 273 to Trump 214. And of course, they have now apparently given Pennsylvania over to Mr. Biden. And of course, we're going to have a little bit to say about that here throughout the broadcast about what has happened in the overnight hours. Just much the same as what happened in Wisconsin and All right, let's try that. Are we back? Give me a 5x5 over on the D Live side, on the YouTube side, if still broadcasting here. There we go, perhaps. 5x5, all right, good. Screwy business going on. Wow, never had that happen before. I was watching some of the chat stuff go through. Says they were doing some of this business with other folks trying to stream here today. Well, apparently that's the nature of the business we're in, where they do not want this information out. So we're going to try this one more time here. I'm going to see if I can get my screen to share as I tried last time and see what happens here. There we go. Perhaps now. All right, good. There we go. A little bit of a glitch. We'll recover. We'll be just fine. Carry on the show. So, like I said, 270 to win, now showing Pennsylvania to the blue for Biden, showing him at effectively 273 to Trump's 214, with several states, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, yet to finalize their counts. Obviously, that would not put Trump in a position to overcome the 270. However, as we well know, a lot of these things are going to be hotly contested, and rightfully so, because there are plenty of shenanigans going on behind the scenes. All right, so just jumping in, over to Zero Hedge. Trump campaign insists race is not over as Georgia announces recount, and rightfully so. We saw some late night funny business going on there as well. As of noon, here's some of the latest updates. Biden has 264 electoral votes. Trump has 214, according to the AP and Bloomberg. So we have discrepancy amongst all of the various outlets in that as to what the true count is. Some are showing that Biden has already eclipsed 270. I think I've got an article in here where they have claimed that Biden has actually won at this point. Well, we'll see. Adam Kelsey says important Pennsylvania point since many Republicans are saying otherwise. ABC News has confirmed that ballots that arrived after polls closed on Election Day are not currently part of the vote count. They're being sequestered at the moment as the legal fight continues. At Pat Toomey specifically said otherwise on our special report about an hour ago, and he subsequently doubled down when at George Stephanopoulos rightfully corrected him. Secretary at Kathy Bookvar actually said this publicly yesterday. The ballots that have been counted so far are the ones that came in by November 3rd, she said at her presser. Our confirmation is that they're still sequestered and still not part of the count. So as of noon on the East Coast, Georgia, Biden leads Trump by 1,587 votes, 49.4% to 49.37%, with 99% of votes in. And Pennsylvania, Biden leads Trump by 8,873 votes, 49.49 to 49.36%, with 98% of votes counted. Over in Nevada, Biden leads Trump by 22,076 votes, 49.83 to 48.07, with 86% of the vote counted. And there still has not been an update reported out of North Carolina, where Trump leads Biden by 76,701 votes, 50.09 to 48.69. And of course, those that have been following, we know that obviously North Carolina has had their date extended. I think yesterday there was 8 days left, so today would obviously make 7 before they officially have to report. As of 11:30, we have another update on the vote out of PA. The new votes in PA were reported from Delaware County, Philly, suburbs, where Biden leads Trump 62.8 to 36.3%, with 95% reporting. And the new batch of votes added in, the Biden received 3,523 and Trump received 1,289, meaning Biden garnered 72% of all the new votes and pushing the VP just ever so slightly ahead of the president. Per Fox, 98% of the Keystone State is reporting, but with the margin so slight, officials have already declared that a recount is expected. Nevada update. Biden now leads Donald Trump by 22,076 votes in Nevada. And we just covered that with 91% reporting, according to Bloomberg. So here we're getting all the Mockingbird media sites. That new batch of Nevada votes came from Clark County, where the vast majority of Nevadans live and where Dem-heavy Las Vegas is located. Biden gained 19,995 votes and Trump gained only 9,357, meaning 65% of all the new votes counted in this update went to Biden. Biden leads Trump in Clark County 53.6% to 44.6%, with 91% reporting. Over to or 11 o'clock update says Nancy Pelosi started her Friday morning press conference by proclaiming that Joe Biden had won the election, defeating President Trump, even as the world waits for a final count, which may or may not be available by Friday evening. This morning, it is clear that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will win the White House, at least according to the delusional Pelosi. For all the kvetching Pelosi did about Trump declaring victory prematurely or refusing to concede, Pelosi has apparently shown few qualms about calling the race for her candidate. As the press briefing continued, Pelosi said President-elect Biden has a strong mandate to lead the country. No, he doesn't. You're full of shit, Pelosi. In what was her only reference to the historic drubbing that just might cost her the speakership early next year, Pelosi said she hopes her members who lost in tough districts should consider running again next cycle. Meanwhile, Dems seemingly can't help touting the victory of Mark Kelly, a former astronaut and husband of the former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was shot by a psychotic lunatic with a gun. Says finally, and ironically, Pelosi echoed President Trump with a familiar jobs, jobs, jobs approaching, touting Biden's commitment to growing the economy, even though the Democrat has also pledged to shut the whole thing down with another lockdown. As of 10:40 this morning, Georgia's Secretary of State has confirmed that there will be a recount. We see that out of Yamiche Alcindor there. There will be a recount out of Bloomberg breaking. There will be a recount in Georgia. The state Secretary of State just said during a news conference, Joe Biden currently holds a narrow lead there over President Trump. That as of 9:30 this morning out of Bloomberg. Bloomberg continues, says there will be a recount in Georgia. Of course, we just hit that. There we go. Georgia presidential election results. So Biden at the time was 49.4. Trump with a 49.4, so basically a dead heat. We'll have more on that on the season. As of 9:45 this morning, Donald Trump Jr. is raising some fair points on Twitter, starting with a comparison of the numbers of 2016 and 2008. Says, I'm retweeting this and genuinely asking for people to explain what is happening here, if not a woman filling out ballots. This is not misinformation or conjecture. I'm asking a question and will gladly retweet an honest explanation. Maybe mainstream media could try the same. Saddam Hussein never held an election in which he got all 23,277 ballots cast, yet here we are in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States of America, and Joe Biden gets 23,277 votes out of 23,277 ballots cast. Statistically impossible, folks. Trump Jr. again, highlighting that. He was retweeting Luke Rudkowski here, says this is an important question to answer. Why does Biden have so many more votes than Democrat senators in swing states? And that was a question that was posed via Zero Hedge article yesterday, where we have seen Joe Biden. Typically you would think if a Dem votes, they would probably go a straight ticket. That's not the case, and hasn't been the case in many of these states where votes just magically show up, where Biden gets the vote, but the rest of the folks on the ticket do not. How does that happen? Well, we're going to touch upon that here momentarily. Trump Jr. says, does anyone really believe that he did that mostly in big cities? Come on, man. Ted Cruz, nope, you're being deliberately dishonest. Someone 20 feet away forced to use binoculars is not an observer under the law. Not if they can see what ballot counters are actually doing. Since most Dems will just believe your rhetoric despite the facts, read the court ruling. And there's the order for canvassing observation. Presumably, yeah, this is in Pennsylvania. There's the order. And of course, we're going to get into that as well here in a little bit. John Favre says Ted Cruz admits that there were Republican and Democratic observers and that he is in fact a liar. Well, again, citing what constitutes an observer does not mean somebody 100 feet away with a frickin' pair of binoculars. Ridiculous. Trump Jr. again, Joe Biden wants the economy shut down and you and your family locked down. I would shut it down. And of course, there's the clip there. We've seen that before. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is insisting that the race is far from over as the battle lines are being drawn in Pennsylvania, where Biden is on track to amass a lead of around 80,000 votes before provisional ballots get counted. One New York Times reporter surmised that this could be enough for the networks to make a projection calling the race for Biden, something they have already done before retracting that. The bottom line is the battle over the biggest remaining prize continues. A word about potential recounts. In Pennsylvania, Republican Senator Pat Toomey suggested that a recount is also possible there. And I will just break from that article there and head to the next. I think we get the idea. And an interesting article come across here today called Why Trump Will Triumph in Pennsylvania Litigation. Before I do that, though, I want you to note this one right here. I'm not going to pull this one up here today, but there are some interesting theories in that going around. Global Intel Hub has this. Says intelligence insider, President Trump set up Democrats in sting operation to catch them stealing election. And like I said, I'm not going to have time to go over that particular article here today, but do note that there are some theories in that, pretty plausible theories that may need to be investigated and reported on a little bit later. Nonetheless, is authored by Alexander Macris via the Contemplations on the Tree of Woe blog. I'm sure everybody knows that particular blog, right? Nonetheless, it's an interesting article. It says the state Supreme Court has violated the U.S. Constitution, meaning in Pennsylvania. It says if you've been following the mainstream media, you've probably read that Trump intends to file a lawsuit in Pennsylvania to, quote, stop counting votes, end quote. Most likely, this has been presented as an outrageous evil, unjustifiable by any standards of common decency, and grossly unconstitutional. Is that really the case, or is it more complex than that? There will be a lawsuit, no doubt, and it will involve a lot of votes being thrown out. The plaintiff, Trump, and or the Republicans will win because Pennsylvania's highest court has almost certainly violated the Constitution of the United States. That's why, in the weeks ahead, the Supreme Court of the United States is going to rule in favor of Trump. So let's wind the clock back about a week to explain how we got here. On October 28th, 2020, in Republican Party of Pennsylvania versus Bukvar, SCOTUS declined, quote, a motion to expedite consideration of a petition for a writ of certiorari, end quote. Let's explain what that is and what's at stake and why Trump is going to follow up. All right, so number one, a writ of certiorari orders a lower court to deliver its record in a case so that the higher court may review it. In this case, SCOTUS was being asked to issue a writ against the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the highest court in the state. Number two, a petition for a writ of certiorari is a request by a litigant in the lower court to a higher court, asking the higher court to order the lower court to issue the writ. You following all that? Following the logic here? Stay tuned. It says in this case, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania had decided against the Republican Party. So the Republican Party petitions the Supreme Court of the U.S. Number three, petitions can take a long time to resolve. A motion to expedite consideration of a petition is a request by a litigant who has filed a petition that the higher court accelerate its process of review. In this case, the Republican Party had filed the motion to expedite. Translated into common English, in Bukvar, the Republican Party sent a request to the U.S. Supreme Court to review a lower court case, and then asked them to hurry up about it. The U.S. Supreme Court declined the motion to expedite. For example, it refused to hurry up, but and this is very important, it did not deny the petition for the writ of certiorari. Thus, the situation as it stands is that there is still a petition before the Supreme Court to review the situation in Pennsylvania. It just refused to do so before the election. Now that raises a question. What's the situation in Pennsylvania? Well, let's work through that. In 2019, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a law called Act 77 that permitted all voters to cast their ballots by mail. But, in Justice Alito's words, unambiguously required that all mailed ballots be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day. The exact text is 2019 Pennsylvania Legislation Services Act 2019-77, and that is a hyperlink that will actually take you to that legislation, which stated, no absentee ballot under this subsection shall be counted which is received in the office of the County Board of Elections later than 8 o'clock p.m. on the day of the primary or election. End quote. I agree with Justice Alito. That is unambiguous. Act 77 also provided that, if this portion of the law was invalidated, that much of the rest of Act 77, including its liberalization of mail-in voting, would also be void. The exact text is sections 1, 2, 3, 3.2, 4, 5, 5.1, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 12 of this Act are non-severable. If any provision of this Act or its application to any person or circumstance is held invalid, the remaining provisions or applications of this Act are void. To again put this into common English, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a law that said mail-in ballots had to arrive by 8 p.m. on Election Day to be counted, and then said that if the court overruled that law, the entire law that permitted mail-in ballots was invalid. In the face of this clear text, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, by a vote of 4-3, made the following decrees, summarized here by SCOTUS. Number 1, mailed ballots don't need to be received by Election Day. Instead, ballots can be accepted if they are postmarked on or before Election Day and are received within 3 days thereafter. Note that this directly contravenes the text above. And number 2, a mailed ballot with no postmark or an illegible postmark must be regarded as timely if it is received by that same date. In doing so, Pennsylvania's High Court expressly acknowledged that, quote, the statutory provision mandating receipt by Election Day was unambiguous, end quote, and conceded the law was constitutional, but still rewrote the law because it thought it needed to do so in the face of a natural disaster. It justified its right to do so under the free and equal election clause of the Pennsylvania state constitution. And I presume that means clause, not cause. So, in essence, here, folks, what the High Court in Pennsylvania has done is they have, in effect, legislated from the bench. One of the things our founder were expressly worried about. And what have we seen leading up to the election? Well, the shenanigans playing out with the courts and the extension of dates and all this and that, all bought off by the Soros Open Society folks. We know this. Now, if you are a conservative, you are already angry. You despise this method of jurisprudence, which elite Harvard lawyers might call living constitutionalism. And you believe that judges should enforce laws as written by lawmakers. You believe this case never should have gotten to SCOTUS because what the state Supreme Court did was egregious. However, if you're a more liberal inclination, you're probably happy with this outcome. You're happy because it'll help Biden win, of course. But in general, you're likely to be fine with the High Court establishing a new right if you think it protects oppressed people from majoritarian tyranny. If you're a committed progressive, in fact, you likely will want to dismiss the entire case as just another defeat for outdated textualism in the face of living constitutionalism. It's easy to frame this case as one of the reactionary judges clinging to the letter of the law. All progressive justices overturn the letter of the law to reflect its true spirit. This is the view that CNN and MSNBC are promoting. Had the Pennsylvania Supreme Court simply ruled that Act 77 was unconstitutional under Pennsylvania's Free and Equal Elections Clause, this would have been a classic textualism versus living constitutionalism case. But it's not. There is a strong likelihood that the state Supreme Court decision violates the federal Constitution. Justice Alito writes, the provisions of the federal Constitution conferring on state legislatures, not state courts, the authority to make rules governing federal elections would be meaningless if a state court could override the rules adopted by the legislature simply by claiming that a state constitutional provision gave the courts the authority to make whatever rules it thought appropriate for the conduct of a fair election. Justice Alito is referring to the following clauses of the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1, which states, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. And Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, which states, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. But no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. Again, translating this into common English, the U.S. Constitution grants state legislators the exclusive right to prescribe the time, place, and manner of holding elections, and to direct the appointment of the electors. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court didn't just say Act 77 is unconstitutional, it rewrote Act 77 itself by judicial fiat, creating new rules for time, place, and manner of holding elections. In doing so, the state Supreme Court violated the U.S. federal Constitution. And that's the real case here. The U.S. Supreme Court is going to rule that the state Supreme Court violated the U.S. Constitution. The state Supreme Court's ruling is going to be overturned, and the votes that arrived after 8 p.m. on Election Day will be discarded. On that basis, Trump will win Pennsylvania. And so far, right now, this thing has got about 126,000 views. Why I thought that necessary to kind of bring that to your attention as a bit of a constitutionalist, somebody who's been through the Federalist Papers, etc., etc. Yes, this is the BS and that they're going to try and do. You know, in every single case where we're seeing these court cases net getting knocked down and all the challenges and whatnot, again, you've heard me say that even leading up to the elections, there's been over 300 filings net across the country. We're going to have to watch and pay attention to what is being said in these particular cases and what has happened leading up to the election, for the simple fact that these justices think they have the power to legislate from the bench. And now in Pennsylvania, they're going to get caught and spanked for it, and rightfully so. All right, well, continuing on, another interesting read here today out of another interesting place, picked up by Zero Hedge here today as well. But this is over at the Monster Hunter Nation blog site, monsterhunternation.com. Interesting. Says, I am more offended by how ham-fisted, clumsy, and audacious the fraud to elect him is in the idea of Joe Biden being president. I think Joe Biden is a corrupt idiot. However, I think America would survive him like we've survived previous idiot administrations. However, what is potentially fatal for America is half the populace believing that their elections are hopelessly rigged and they're eternally effed. And now, however this shakes out in court, that's exactly what half the country is going to think. People are pissed off, and rightfully so. Before I become a novelist, I was an accountant. In auditing, you look for red flags. That's weird bits in the data that suggest something shifty is going on. You flag those weird things so you can delve into them further. One flag doesn't necessarily mean there's fraud. Weird things happen. A few flags mean stupidity or dishonesty. But a giant pile of red flags means that there's bad shit going on and people should be in jail. Yeah. Except for in politics, where apparently all you have to do is dismiss a bunch of red flags, is be a Democrat and mumble something about fascist voter suppression. Then you can do all sorts of blatant crime and get off. I've been trying to keep up with the fire hose of information about what's going on during this cluster F of an election. Last night, I was on Facebook talking about the crazy high third world dictatorship level voter turnout levels in the deep blue areas of these swing states was very suspicious. Somebody gaslighted me about how I'd have to do better than that. So this was my quick reply, listing off the questionable BS I could think of off the top of my head. The massive turnout alone is a red flag. But as for doing better, the late night spikes that were enough to close all the Trump leads are a red flag. The statistically impossible breakdown of the ratios of these vote dumps is a red flag. The ratios of these dumps being far better than the percentage in the bluest of blue cities, even though the historical data does not match, is a red flag. The ratios of these vote dumps favoring Biden more in these few battlegrounds than the ratio for the rest of the country, even the bluest of the blue, is a red flag. Biden outperforming Obama among these few urban vote dumps, even though Trump picked up points in every demographic group in the rest of the country, red flag. The poll observers being removed, red flag. The counters cheering as GOP observers are removed, red flag. The fact that the Dem observers outnumber the GOP observers 3-1, red flag, and basis of the first lawsuit filed. The electioneering at the polls, on video, is a red flag. The willful violation of the court order requiring the separation of ballots by type, red flag. USPS whistleblower reporting to the Inspector General that today they were ordered to backdate ballots to yesterday, another red flag. The video of 2 a.m. deliveries of what appear to be boxes of ballots with no chain of custody or other observers right before the late night miracle spikes, red flag. Any of those things would be enough to trigger an audit in the normal world. This many flags, and I'd be giggling in anticipation of catching some thieves. And it isn't that I have to do better. I'm just a Gen Pop observer who happened to be a retired auditor with a finely tuned BS detector. This is going to the courts. So now, I want to delve into some of these some more. The problem is that there's a ton of info swirling around, some good, some crap. It doesn't help the reporters are usually dishonored or not very bright and absolute trash at presenting data. Part of our problem is big tech is actively stomping on stories that make their guy look bad. While compiling these, I discovered that several of the links I'd looked at yesterday had been vanished by Facebook or Twitter. For the last 4 years, half the country was all, Trump is illegitimate. He's not my president. He stole the election. So on and so forth. And that was all based upon nebulous ideas about Russian interference. The Russian interference mostly boiled down to them buying ads on Facebook or having fake bots trolling on Twitter last time. This time, the actual giant mega corporations, Facebook, Twitter, and Google themselves, have actively censored stories in order to protect their candidate. So you think after this pile of suspicious election cluster Fs that make the game look totally rigged, the other half of the country is going to accept Joe Biden as legitimate? Oh, hell no. When you are auditing, you see mistakes happen all the time. Humans make errors, except in real life, mistakes usually go in different directions. When all the mistakes go in the same direction and benefit the same parties, they probably aren't mistakes. They're malfeasance. Let's go back a bit to before the election day to see why people would be suspicious that the game has been rigged. Most of the mainstream polls were utter garbage, off by what I believe to be the largest amounts ever in all of American history. Of course, this thing that surely demoralized the right and helped the left raise funds was just an innocent sampling error rather than a purposeful sampling bias. Uh-huh. Then, in the weeks leading up to the election, big tech and the media had a concentrated censorship effort to stop what was probably the juiciest October surprise in modern history. But them silencing major newspapers and U.S. senators was just a mistake in their innocent efforts to fact check. Then, on election day, states like Florida that were obviously swinging hard for Trump with no possible mathematical way for Biden to come back, the news wouldn't call for Trump. States where it was clearly up in the air, just based on even the most cursory of statistical analysis. Arizona, they called for Biden as soon as possible. But that was just innocent mistakes, and not an attempt to set the narrative of inevitable Biden victory by major media. When Trump pulled ahead in the Midwestern swing states by what were starting to appear to be insurmountable amounts, they suddenly threw the brakes on the counts. My favorite part of this was when it looked like Trump was going to win. The Chinese yuan crashed, which is pretty telling about just how shitty a candidate Biden is. Okay, suddenly stopping all these counts seemed a little weird, but most of America went to bed thinking that this was a close race, with Trump in the lead in the Electoral College. Then we woke up in the morning and everybody saw the 538 graph showing a massive middle of the night spike for Joe Biden, with almost zilch and corresponding votes for Trump. Now, one of those got walked back as typo. Again, funny how all these mistakes keep going in one direction, but the damage is already done. And all of a sudden, most of America is paying a whole lot more attention to places like Wisconsin and Michigan than we usually do. That's how flags work. And it turns out the single six-figure typo was only one of many statistically improbable Biden vote dumps to come. And so this article does go on for a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link out in chat. You guys can take a look at it, pick it up. Very interesting read. Nonetheless, I would encourage you guys to read through it. Probably matches many of our sentiments. Nonetheless, let's start getting into the states. All right, so keeping in tow with what we've done the last couple days, we'll start with Arizona. Over to Gateway Pundit. Arizona ballot instructions specify do not use a Sharpie. May not be read by tabulator. So I think what I have affectionately called this as of yesterday, Sharpie Gate. The saga continues. And so we get this here late yesterday. As the corrupt county officials across Arizona scramble to downplay Sharpie Gate with the help of a complicit media running cover, it appears as though they are being outsmarted by their own ballot instructions. Their own voter's guide specified, do not use a Sharpie type pen as it will bleed through. Stephen Crowder brought this to light on his live stream yesterday around the 3-hour, 20-minute, 7-second mark. And it says, but that's not all. You can catch that there. According to Pima County, Tucson area, voter frequently asked questions. Says the ballot system used in Arizona is an optical scan system. The ballots are tabulated by optical scan readers. The readers are machines that have been calibrated to read the markings on the ballots. The type of ink that is most likely to be recognized by the reader is blue or black ballpoint ink. Other colors of ink may or may not be read by the tabulator, depending on the ink formula mixture used by the ink manufacturer. The safest choice is a simple blue or black ink ballpoint pen. Since ballots frequently have issues or candidates printed on both sides of the ballot, you want to be certain to use a marking device that does not bleed through to the other side, since this could cause the bleed through marking to be interpreted as a vote. We therefore strongly suggest that you do not use felt tip markers such as magic markers or Sharpies. Stray marks of any kind should be kept to a minimum. Once again, the safest choice is standard blue or black ink ballpoint pen. Oh, but it gets better. In 2012, Pima County issued 5,383 replacement ballots. One of the reasons for disqualified ballots that needed replacing? People used felt tip Sharpies. And there we see the recorder's office is required to ask voters the reason they need to receive replacement ballots. Many of those highlighted there. It's a screenshot from a Pima County post 2012 election report. But what if the poll workers say there were no regular pens floating around? Well, according to their own guidelines, multiple people are supposed to have regular ballpoint ink pens along with Sharpies. And there we see that. It says the election workers are instructed to use Sharpies only when packaging up boxes of envelopes to certify their authenticity. In a video posted on the Pima County YouTube channel last month, County Recorder F. Ann Rodriguez instructs voters to use a black or blue ballpoint pen, no Sharpies, to fill in the ovals. We've downloaded a video to re-upload when Pima County disappears it from their channel. Over in Maricopa County, Phoenix area, County Recorder Adrian Fontes drafted a letter to the Board of Supervisors recapping the 2018 elections. He specifically addressed concerns over using Sharpies that it could lead to machines misreading the ballots. And there is all that. In the post-2018 elections report, Maricopa County officials included as part of a voters frequently asked questions section where they say not to use a Sharpie, that it could damage a ballot, and that damaged ballots cannot be read by the machines. So, that being said, the shenanigans continue around Sharpiegate over in Arizona. And so, what else about Arizona? Well, yesterday we heard some stuff about Rachel Maddow complaining. This out of the Western Journal. Says, watch, Rachel Maddow gasps, says, oh God, when she realizes Trump is gaining in Arizona. So, Rachel Maddow sounded both disheartened and alarmed to learn that President Donald Trump might yet pull out a win in Arizona. Of course, a victory in the Grand Canyon state would make it much easier for Trump to win re-election. While Fox News and the Associated Press have called the Arizona race for Democrat Joe Biden, other major network news outlets have not, knowing there are hundreds of thousands of votes yet to be counted. There is good reason they are not, as MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki explained to Maddow on Wednesday night after Arizona's most populous county, Maricopa, released about 75,000 of the approximately 400,000 votes that were still to come at that point. Kornacki explained that Arizona had 3 of what he described as buckets to process for the election. First came the early votes, in which Biden jumped to a 10-point lead over Trump. Then came the votes cast on Election Day, which Trump carried by 26 percentage points, Kornacki said. Now, Maricopa County is in the midst of counting a third batch made up primarily of ballots dropped off at polling places on Election Day, or early ballots that arrived in the days immediately before it. Approximately 59% of these ballots were breaking for Trump, Kornacki said, to which Maddow gasped, "Oh God, that's crazy." So let's take a quick listen.
Of the new votes that were just reported out, Donald Trump won 43,966 of them. Joe Biden won 30,322 of them. Donald Trump is getting around 59% of these votes.
That's crazy.
Now, yeah, so that is, remember the 3 buckets here.
Yeah.
Yep. So, not to be disheartened, folks, there is still an opportunity for the liberal tears to flow. We'll have our day. Trust us. This pace of 59% for Trump, it might change as more ballots are added into here, Kornacki added, seeming to want to reassure Maddow. So let's see. But this is at least establishes up front the possibility here that this third bucket of votes is a Trump-favorable bucket of votes. So more to come in that regard. And still in Arizona, new batch of Arizona votes nets Trump over 10,000 additional votes this out of the blaze. Will it be enough? In the key state of Arizona, the latest batch of votes that have been counted have reduced Joe Biden's lead even further, to the point where it has shrunk to less than 47,000 votes. Arizona has become a hot point of contention in the 2020 race after Fox News called the state on Tuesday night in a move that was hotly contested by the Trump campaign. At the time, President Donald Trump trailed former VP Biden by over 100,000 votes, with substantial remaining votes in Maricopa County, which was trending blue. However, the Trump campaign insisted that the remaining mail-in votes to be counted would break the president's way. So, again, the counting is not yet done. Fox screwed up. They knew it. And, of course, they were trying to suppress the vote by doing exactly what they did, and they got caught. And quite frankly, I would not be surprised if Fox gets sued over it. So, nice job, Paul Ryan. In any case, over to Georgia now. Out of Washington Examiner, Trump's lead reportedly narrows in Georgia. This was late yesterday before the overnight shenanigans, about 9:38 p.m. last night. President's lead in Georgia reportedly narrowed significantly after Chatham County released its absentee ballot results. The county reported about 17,000 more ballots Thursday, about 2/3 of which went to former Vice President Joe Biden, according to Atlanta's WXIA. Forsyth County has also updated its numbers with 1,460 votes for Biden and 1,311 for President Trump. Trump is leading the state by about 3,500 votes, according to WJCL. Trump has expressed his frustration with the state that originally showed him in the lead, then narrowed as more votes were counted. He said bad actors are trying to steal the election from him. The Trump campaign held a press conference in the state on Thursday, where Donald Trump Jr. and Rep. Doug Collins were both in attendance. Trump Jr. tweeted earlier in the day the amount of fraud being reported in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, Georgia, and Wisconsin is unreal. Please report personal experiences. Please have all facts and evidence. So, continuing on, in Georgia, out of Newsbreak, we find judge dismisses Trump lawsuit challenging Georgia vote counting. And so this was just about 24 hours ago. A judge has quickly dismissed at least one of the Trump campaign's attempts to stop vote counting in still uncalled states. President Trump's campaign and Georgia's GOP filed a petition Wednesday challenging vote counts in Savannah's Chatham County, alleging some absentee ballots that arrived too late are being counted. Chatham County Superior Court Judge James F. Bass quickly threw out the petition and the campaign's request to stop the count Thursday morning as Georgia continues to work out its close presidential race, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports. So, again, a lot of these things are going to be hotly contested. At the end of the day, probably a lot of these things are going to get challenged, thrown out, whatever, because they may be judges in that who have yet to be replaced. Probably set on the bench by the likes of Biden or Clinton or even Bush or however far back. So a lot of these will probably get appealed, and ultimately all of this will probably end up at the Supreme Court. Now over to Gateway Pundit. Breaking. Overnight, Dems finally steal Georgia. So yes, folks, while we were sleeping, this is what happens. So, overnight, the state of Georgia was stolen. The Dems made up a 100,000 vote deficit since Election Day to steal the state. President Trump held massive rallies in Georgia before the election. He had an estimated 42,000 supporters at his rally in Rome, Georgia, less than a week ago. Biden held 2 events in Georgia on October 27th, where he garnered up an estimated 70 supporters. But don't trust your own eyes. Yeah, we're being gaslit. And don't blame this on COVID. President Trump had hundreds of thousands watching his rallies on the internet, but Biden only had a few thousand watching his events. We're told not to trust our own eyes. The corrupt Dems, big media, and big tech want us to believe that none of this happened, that somehow Joe Biden won the election. It is a lie. And so it continues on. On election night, President Trump had an insurmountable lead in Georgia. There was no way he could legitimately lose, according to analysts. Even with mail-in ballots and massive voter fraud, the Dems couldn't recover. Then, at about 11 o'clock at night, the state decided to shut down and call it a day. We still have no information on who made this decision or why it occurred. On Wednesday morning, the day after the election, it was reported that with 94% of the votes counted, Trump had a lead of 102,823 votes, with a 2.38 million votes to Biden's 2.278 million votes. And there we see that per the graphic. This is then Wednesday afternoon, reported the Dems in Georgia were trying to bring ballots to people to have them altered so they would be legit. It's probably more likely the Dems took these ballots, altered them themselves, and then turned them back in. And yesterday, if you were here for the broadcast, you heard me talk about this quote-unquote curing process. Wherever the hell that came from, we heard about that in Pennsylvania, where suddenly you can cast a ballot, absentee ballot, mail-in ballot, and apparently those are supposed to be sealed up until the point that they are open for counting. But somehow, mysteriously, these ballots get opened up, and whoever it is that is doing the opening goes back to the actual voter and says, "Do you really mean what you have filled out on that particular ballot?" That's the curing process as I understand it anyway. And so apparently this is something new that they're doing to try and steal and swing the votes. Then on Thursday morning, Georgia still had not contemplated counting, but between Wednesday and Thursday, Biden picked up a huge percent of the outstanding ballots. Thursday morning, with 98% of the votes counted, President Trump was only up by 18,098 votes, with 2.43 million votes to Biden's 2.41 million votes. Here's a graphic for that. In the 24 hours between Wednesday and Thursday, the Dems picked up 73% of the votes counted. Out of 187,027 votes counted in 24 hours, 135,876 of those votes were given to Biden. Imagine the odds. I mean, doggone, man. If I had some money to go try and blow out in Vegas, good Lord, I'd be rich. This morning, Georgia reports that the old and senile Biden somehow pulled out Georgia too. As of this morning, Fox News is reporting that Joe Biden is up by 917 votes, with 2.449 million votes to Trump's 2.448 million votes. And the graphic there. It's time Georgia stands for justice. So, yes, again, in case you were not aware, overnight, the steal was in full effect while we were sleeping. Yet again, just like what we saw play out in Michigan and up in Wisconsin in the day previous. So, over to real clear politics. Reports of election fraud are piling up in Michigan. So, now back up to Michigan here. We talked a little bit about this yesterday about the BS going on up there. It appears that Dems in Detroit, a city with a long history of election fraud, are tampering with absentee ballots and breaking state law. And so that carries on over at the Federalist. Let's see. It says as absentee ballot counting continues in a handful of key states across the country, reporters of voter fraud, ballot tampering, and the illegal removal of Republican elections observers are cropping up in Michigan, especially in Detroit, a Democratic stronghold which has a long history of voter fraud. On Wednesday, the Trump administration announced it was filing a lawsuit in Michigan over what it claims are systematic efforts to prevent Republican election observers from monitoring the ballot counting process as allowed under state law. The lawsuit comes as video clips continue to surface on social media showing election officials denying access to authorized GOP poll watchers. Eric Nesbitt, a Michigan state senator, posted a video on Twitter Wednesday afternoon of election workers at the convention center in Detroit where absentee ballots are being counted. The video shows workers cheering every time an official election observer with the Michigan GOP is ejected from the counting room. Apparently, this has been happening frequently in violation of state law. Dem observers say Nesbitt now outnumber Republican observers at the convention center 3-1. Yep, so there we see that. I think we've seen in recent days similar scenarios play out. Here's why that's a problem. When an absentee ballot is unreadable for whatever reason, a ballot counter takes out a blank ballot, lays it on the table next to the unreadable ballot, and transposes the vote so it can be filed and tallied. Republican and Democratic poll challengers, as they're called, are supposed to observe this process as it happens and make sure that the vote is transposed accurately. In addition, Michigan state law requires that a Republican and a Democrat official sign off on every voting precinct where absentee ballots are cast in this manner. Phil Klein is a former Kansas Attorney General and now an attorney for the nonprofit Amistad Project, which filed a lawsuit Wednesday alleging that tens of thousands of ballots in Detroit have been illegally filled out by election officials and Democratic election observers. We have confirmed evidence that Democratic election officials have violated state law, he told the Federalist, and have opened the door for fraud involving tens of thousands of ballots. So we'll just leave that there. At the end of the day, it's more of the same. The shenanigans continue up in Michigan. All right, now over still in Michigan, out of Epoch Times says Michigan County's updated results show flip from Biden to Trump. Ruh-roh. So, the Michigan county that found skewed election results reported an updated vote count on Thursday. Antrim County initially reported that 62% of voters chose Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden for president. But the updated results show 56% of the approximately 17,000 votes compared to Biden's 42%. Trump received 9,783 votes to Biden's 7,289. That was an increase of over 5,000 votes for Trump compared to the initial results. Political observers expressed shock when the initial results were posted because Antrim is run by Republicans and was won by Trump by a large margin in the 2016 election. Antrim County officials still haven't identified what caused the skewed results. County Clerk Cheryl Guy said officials were working with Election Source, the company that provided voting software. The county uses Dominion Voting Systems equipment. Neither company responded to queries from the Epoch Times, nor did Guy when asked about what happened. Guy told the Detroit Free Press that the problem appeared to be a combination of a software glitch and a human error. Dominion systems are used by a number of other Michigan counties as well as counties in other states. Dominion Systems experienced a technical glitch in two Georgia counties on Election Day, which caused the machines to crash for several hours. Marsha Ridley, election supervisor at Spalding County Board of Election, told Politico that the glitch was due to the company uploading something the night prior, which is not normal. I might have an idea. I think I saw some folks digging behind the scenes in recent days on some of these voting machines and find out that, people like Nancy Pelosi have vested interest in said machine outfits, corporations. Perhaps maybe they inserted a little backdoor mechanism in, huh? Just a thought. Machines in Wayne County, Michigan also stopped working on Election Day. The updated Antrim County results don't have much of an impact on Biden's lead in Michigan. Biden received about 150,000 more votes than Trump, according to unofficial results. The Epoch Times is listing the state's results as incomplete because of litigation filed by Trump's campaign. Michigan delivers the winner 16 electoral votes. Trump won the state in 2016 by approximately 111,000 votes. The updated Antrim County results showed a gain for Republican Senate nominee John James, where James received 9,355 votes compared to 6,807 for Senator Gary Peters, a Dem, and a race was called for Peters by news organizations this week. James and his campaign have alleged irregularities. When this process is complete, I will, of course, accept the results and the will of the people. But at this time, there's enough credible evidence to warrant an investigation to ensure that elections were conducted in a transparent, legal, and fair manner, James said in a statement on November 5th. And I think at the end of the day, that's what all of us want. We want a fair election and it to be done transparently, legally, and of course follow the process and edicts if the court says that observers net are to be able to be where the ballots net are being counted or having to be transposed, then so be it. Why the problem with the Dems and why the cheering like what we saw in Detroit? It shouldn't be an issue unless you're doing something nefarious, and I think the evidence is pretty compelling that that is exactly what is going on. All right, so over to Citizen Free Press. We get this. Alert, 34 counties in Michigan used faulty software program. So Joe Gum apparently had a pretty good tweet thread out there. I'm going to read a couple of these here. Update, the Antrim County Clerk's Office in Michigan told me the election program it used, Election Source, had issues and the office is now reviewing 16,047 total votes. The source I spoke with said she believes 33 other counties used the program. Hashtag post-election 2020. He continues on, says Trump did not lose Antrim County in Michigan. It is now confirmed that 32 other counties use the same software as Antrim County. He will get 6,000 plus votes out of Antrim. What about the other counties with the same software? So Antrim County Clerk Cheryl Guy, a Republican who ran unopposed and won a third four-year term Tuesday in the strongly GOP county, said the results on electronic tapes and a computer card are accurate, but it appears some of the results were somehow scrambled after the cards were transported in sealed bags from township precincts to county offices and downloaded onto a computer. So, very interesting. So, through and through, the process is screwed, pretty much. Not only are we not able to observe the transposing of illegible ballots, but apparently they can't get their numbers from point A to B with somehow not being scrambled. Insanity. Nonetheless, over to Sputnik. Michigan AG calls on residents to stop telling her staff to shove Sharpies in uncomfortable places. So apparently, Sharpie Gate has migrated across the country. And Michigan is feeling the effects, perhaps. So, as the U.S. is impatiently awaiting the results of the 3rd of November presidential race between incumbent President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival, former VP Joe Biden, Michigan became one of the disputable states between the two candidates. Dana Nessel, Michigan's Attorney General, on Thursday called on residents to stop telling state election officials to, quote, shove Sharpies in uncomfortable places, end quote, arguing that such behavior is never appropriate, especially as the American nation is waiting for the outcome of the 3rd of November presidential election. And here's her tweet. It says, dear members of the public, please stop making harassing and threatening calls to my staff. They are kind, hardworking public servants just doing their job. Asking them to shove Sharpies in uncomfortable places is never appropriate and is a sad commentary on the state of our nation. The Democratic Attorney General's request came in response to reports of voters that worried their ballots would not be counted because they were filled in using Sharpies. USA Today reported on Wednesday that some voters claimed that election officials in the battleground state of Michigan handed voters Sharpies, a brand name of permanent markers known for their strong ink and stronger fumes, so that their ballots would not be counted. However, Michigan election officials said the claim was untrue, pointing out that Sharpies are an acceptable method of marking ballots. Blue and black Sharpies is perfectly fine, Tracy Wimmer, a spokesperson for the Michigan Secretary of State's office, said in a statement to the Associated Press. To say otherwise is misinformation. The state of Michigan, now called for Democratic candidate Joe Biden, is currently contested by Republican President Donald Trump. And on Wednesday, in a bid to take back the state from Biden, the Trump campaign took legal action to stop counting votes, quote, until meaningful access has been granted, end quote, to counting locations to observe the counting process, which is guaranteed by Michigan law. The president's team also demanded to review those ballots which were open and counted while we did not have meaningful access. However, the counting process was not halted. As of the present time, Biden is leading in the hotly contested presidential race with 264 electoral votes. According to AP, Trump is trailing behind with 214. And so that out of Sputnik, a little bit of humor, I guess, in regards to what has been going on, not just Arizona, but apparently across the country, where perhaps in some cases Sharpies are an acceptable tool for filling into little bubbles and that on your ballots, and other places not. But please stop telling them to shove Sharpies in uncomfortable places. Yeah. All right, so back out to Nevada. Jonathan Turley, our constitutional lawyer, says what happens in Vegas may not stay in Vegas, why the Nevada challenge could be important to the presidential election. It turns out that some things that happen in Vegas may not stay in Vegas, like voting. The Republican Party in the Silver State is now arguing that thousands of votes in those close presidential elections were cast by workers who moved out of the state or even by deceased individuals. Various voters reported their deceased relatives receiving live ballots in the mail. Now, the Nevada Republican Party has sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department alleging at least 3,062 instances of voter fraud in the battleground state. The referral is substantially less than the 10,000 referenced earlier, but the underlying allegation is still important. The early concern for many of us was that the system established in Clark County would be difficult to review for violations due to how the tabulation was handled and the record preserved. The allegations over ineligible voting were raised before Election Day. Many states, like Nevada, are relying on notoriously outdated voter lists and applying fairly lax standards for confirming the identity of voters for mail-in ballots. In Nevada, this is a particular concern because many workers moved out of the state due to the pandemic's impact on the casino industry. You cannot vote if you moved out of the state over 30 days prior to the balloting. The problem is the accuracy of state voting and residency records in showing such changes shortly before an election. Absent a system of authentication of residency and identification, it would be a system based on the honor system, an approach that no casino would allow even at the nickel slot section. As courts deal with a flurry of lawsuits in various states, I have been focusing on the allegations in Nevada of thousands of ineligible or even deceased voters. That is a type of systemic failure that could cloud results in not just the Silver State, but other states. Nevada was one of the states that I identified before the election as one of 3 states that I was watching the most closely for election challenges. However, the problems raised in Nevada could raise concerns with shared elements to various states from Michigan to Pennsylvania. The reliance on questionable voter lists and the lack of authentication systems were raised months ago. The legal problem is not simply that such systems may allow for large numbers of ineligible votes, but that they would not allow sufficient review of ballots to resolve such questions. The criminal referral is substantially less than the 10,000 referenced earlier, but the underlying allegation is still important. The early concern for many of us was that the system established in Clark County would be difficult to review for violations due to how the record was being preserved. The Republicans are claiming that this is just the first set of identified voters with alleged ineligibility. Conversely, Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak, a Democrat, issued a statement arguing the state was, quote, widely recognized as being a leader in election administration, end quote, and that he had the utmost confidence in the abilities of Nevada's local election officials and Secretary of State Barbara Segavask to accurately count every eligible vote cast in the Silver State. We have no basis to rule in or rule out either claim. And I have repeatedly stated that we must not make assumptions on either side. My concern is that it is not clear how a court could review these ballots in Clark County if it agrees that there appears to be systemic problems. If the court believes that thousands of votes illegally that lack of a record could prove the undoing of the state officials, at some point the burden can shift and courts demand proof that a problem was not systemic. If they cannot, the questions will be raised whether the same vulnerability existed in other states, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Georgia. A court could be presented with a decision of when the unknowable becomes the unacceptable. If the court believes that thousands of unlawful votes were cast and the ultimate number impossible to confirm, the only certain way to address a systemic failure would be a special election, a prospect that few judges would relish and even fewer would seriously consider. So I'll just break from that there for a little bit, continue on. Jonathan Turley has usually been pretty on top of these things and definitely trust his assessment of the situation. So, that being said, the implications of the filing in Nevada are far greater than just the state of Nevada, in that the implications could be appealed and raised and sent to various other courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court, where it could negate the votes, if they have to, out of all these other states where dead voters, Annette, may have been on the count. And of course, if you remember right, even leading up to the election, Tom Fitton and company over at Judicial Watch had done a fantastic job of trying to clean up voter rolls in many of the states. But I think he even warned there were still some 1.9 million. I forget which state it was, or if this was in general across the land, 1.9 million voters and that still needed to be cleaned up that were not in their respective spots. So, we knew it was a problem going in, and it's still a systemic problem to today. Still in Nevada, Nevada voter fraud. Bill Barr now gets involved. This out of the Horn. Says the Republican Party in Nevada is claiming that 3,062 instances of voter fraud have occurred in the battleground state as accounts continue to flood from Tuesday's election. The party's lawyers have officially sent Attorney General William Barr a criminal referral on the heels of President Donald Trump's claims that the race has been rife with illegal ballots and voter fraud. And there we see the Nevada GOP tweet. Says our lawyers just sent a criminal referral to AG Barr regarding at least 3,062 instances of voter fraud. We expect that number to grow substantially. Thousands of individuals have been identified who appear to have violated the law by casting ballots after they moved from Nevada. The Silver State has been under scrutiny since Tuesday's election as the state's ballot results trickle out slowly. The Nevada GOP's effort serves the interest of the president, who addressed the nation Thursday and attacked the confidence in the electoral voting system. The press conference followed rumors of isolated instances of fraud. The Trump team will focus on the courts in an effort to bring cases of mass voter fraud to the judges. So more of the same in that regard. Over to Gateway Pundit, still in Nevada. As many as 6,000 illegal votes identified in Nevada. Thousands of people referred to DOJ for potential criminal violation of election laws. So, a law firm working in conjunction with the Trump campaign's legal team has identified as many as 6,000 illegal votes in Nevada. A letter was sent to the Clark County, Nevada District Attorney alleging voter fraud by people who are not legal residents of Clark County. Indeed, we have initially identified the 3,062 voters who moved from Nevada before the election, but still cast ballots in this election, the letter to the Clark County DA read. We have verified this by cross-referencing the list of general election voters with publicly available change of address records. For instance, demographic experts agree that the National Change of Address database only captures about 1/3 of relocations. Consequently, this number will likely grow by 6,000 voters at minimum. John Roberts says, letter to the Clark County, Nevada District Attorney alleging voter fraud by people who are not legal residents of Clark County. There we see that from Weir Law Group, LLC, addressed to Mr. or Ms. Miller. And it continues, says the Nevada GOP sent a criminal referral to U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr regarding the 3,062 instances of voter fraud identified by Trump's legal team. Rick Grinnell is on the ground in Nevada fighting like hell to make sure officials are counting legal ballots only. We see his tweet says, "This is frightening. Nevada has allowed non-residents to vote. Legal voters everywhere should be outraged." And noted attorney Harmeet Dillon is also fighting to count legal votes only. Boom, as many as 6,000 illegal votes identified in Nevada. And so the saga continues. The challenges will continue in Nevada and probably throughout the rest of the country. Still out of Gateway Pundit. Now back to North Carolina. Breaking exclusive. North Carolina announced 100% of precincts were reported on election night, but never called Trump win. Now claim only 94% of ballots counted. Say what? How is that possible and why? Well, North Carolina announced 100% of precincts reported on election night and decided to stop counting. But North Carolina now claims they counted only 94% of votes, and this is what is reported in the corrupt media to this day. The state of North Carolina announced that 100% of precincts reported at 11:40 p.m. on election night. And there we see the screen grab of that, highlighting the counts and that down there. Precincts reported, it shows 100% down here in the blue. Ballots cast was 74,000, something like that. I can barely read it. But nonetheless, at some point on election night, the state decided to stop counting. If all of their precincts were counted, they had no need to continue counting. But for some reason, the media never reported that President Trump won the state. Yesterday, it was reported the state has mail-in ballots to count and will not do so till next week. So full results in North Carolina are not expected until next week, according to local media outlets, to allow outstanding mail-ins and provisional ballots to be counted. The governor and Secretary of State of North Carolina are Democrats. More corruption for Democrats who will steal an election for power. So, yeah. Other interesting news breaking: Pennsylvania Democrats create nearly 700,000 votes to put Joe Biden in lead since election. So now we jump up to Pennsylvania. Overnight, the state of Pennsylvania was stolen along with Georgia. Democrats made up a 700,000 vote deficit since Election Day to steal the state. President Trump held massive rallies in Pennsylvania before the election. Trump had an estimated 58,000 supporters at his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, less than a week ago. And there we see pictures from that. And I'm sure many of you folks who have watched any of the respective channels like this one or RSBN, etc., well, you would probably have seen that they actually do pan the cameras around and show these sizable crowds at these peaceful protests. I won't call them rallies because we'll use the proper terminology here. But the peaceful protests were quite large in size, nor were they properly socially distanced, but hey, they are not super spreader events. In any case, Joe Biden held 3 events in Pennsylvania on Monday where he garnered an estimated 160 supporters total. Let's see. 160 divided by 3, that's about, a little over 50 folks per event, possibly. But don't trust your own eyes. On October 26, a Biden event looked like a campout with an estimated 10 supporters present. Care to roast any weenies, folks? Yeah. And don't blame this on COVID. President Trump had hundreds of thousands watching his rallies on the internet, but Biden only had a few thousand watching his events. We're told not to trust our own eyes. The corrupt Dems, big media, and big tech want us to believe that none of this happened, that somehow Joe Biden won the election. It is a lie. We call BS. Exactly. And continuing on, still out of Gateway Pundit, we get this. Oops, I think I jumped backwards. Sorry about that. Let's jump over to this one. Joseph Stalin was right. While America slept, Dems swept in and took the lead in Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. And of course, the quote from Joseph Stalin says, I consider it completely unimportant who in the party will vote or how. But what is extraordinarily important is this: who will count the votes and how. And is that not exactly what we're seeing play out right now in the shroud of secrecy? Windows being covered up, observers being kicked out, the cheers going up, dead voters not magically casting ballots. Insanity. Joseph Stalin is famous for this 1923 quote, which I just read. How many times in history has this been played out? Ask the people of Venezuela how this worked out for Hugo Chavez. Last night, while you were sleeping, Dems took the lead 3 days after the election in Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. And so there we have that. I think this is actually a Fox News clip, but I don't think that the embed must be coming through correctly here. So nonetheless, yes, that happened. And still, in regards to Pennsylvania, I got this tweet out of Rudy Giuliani. It says at least 21,000 dead people on Pennsylvania voter rolls. 9,212 registrants have been dead for at least 5 years. At least 1,990 registrants have been dead for at least 10 years. And at least 197 registrants have been dead for at least 20 years. Perfectly normal in the Dems world. And that highlights an article out of Breitbart there. So, yeah. The fraud continues. All right, out of Jerusalem Post, U.S. Postal Service says 1,700 ballots found in Pennsylvania facilities. Ballots must be received by Friday evening in Pennsylvania in order to be counted. The U.S. Postal Service said about 1,700 ballots had been identified in Pennsylvania at processing facilities during 2 sweeps Thursday and were in the process of being delivered to election officials. In a court filing early Friday, USPS said about 1,070 ballots had been found at the USPS Philadelphia Processing and Distribution Center. About 300 were found at the Pittsburgh Processing Center, 266 at a Lehigh Valley facility, and others found at other Pennsylvania processing centers. Ballots must be received by Friday evening in Pennsylvania in order to be counted. The vote for the U.S. president remains extremely close, and Pennsylvania is one of the states that remain undecided. Earlier on Thursday, supporters of both U.S. President Donald Trump and his Democratic challenger Joe Biden held rallies in Philadelphia as election staffers slowly counted thousands of mail-in ballots that could decide Pennsylvania's crucial 20 electoral college votes. So apparently, the post office shirked their duty, did not get ballots moved in time, but somehow, by the grace of God, they must still allow for these to be counted. And it just so happened that Pennsylvania adjusted their times and that per rulings and that prior to the election to allow for all this, right? And we wonder why POTUS has said, stop the count. All right, so out of Red State, breaking Decision Desk HQ calls Pennsylvania and the White House for Joe Biden. So apparently, they're getting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse here, and they're already proclaiming that Joe Biden is indeed the winner of the race. Right. With a new batch of votes coming in this morning in Pennsylvania, our partners at Decision Desk HQ have called the state of Pennsylvania for former VP Joe Biden, giving him 20 electoral votes and victory over incumbent President Donald Trump. And there we see the tweet out of Decision Desk HQ. Biden's victory will give him and incoming Vice President Kamala Harris control of the White House. Dems will still hold the House of Reps, and the Republican Party still has a chance to hold the Senate. Control of the Senate appears to be coming down to Georgia, which swung toward Biden early Friday morning. Both U.S. Senate seats there are up for grabs and appear to be heading toward runoffs. The Trump campaign have been preparing lawsuits in close swing states, and on Thursday promised more are coming. The Biden campaign announced earlier this week that they were already building their transition team and even preparing to send staffers to various federal agencies to prepare for the transition. And of course, you can follow the remaining election results here at Red State, which, of course, I have done here over the last couple days to bring as much information as possible to you guys. So, yeah, apparently Decision Desk HQ is now calling it. I wonder how many other outlets are doing the same. All right, so out of True Pundit, over to Wisconsin. Wisconsin National Guard was brought in to help with ballot counting. And again, if you remember back a couple of days ago, they too experienced a little dark of night ballot drop. Says at least 13,500 misprinted absentee ballots in 2 counties will have their votes transcribed by poll workers, possibly delaying results. Poll workers in 2 Wisconsin counties will have to transcribe votes from at least 13,500 misprinted absentee ballots to clean ballots early Wednesday, possibly delaying reporting of results. The state Supreme Court refused to issue a ruling on the ballots at issue, which cannot be fed into electronic tabulating machines, and instead told Outagamie and Calumet counties to use the statutorily prescribed method of ballot duplication for counting ballots of this nature. Poll workers will need to work around the clock to meet the deadline for counting non-provisional ballots, which is 4 p.m. the day after the election. Well, meanwhile, 20 Wisconsin National Guard members were sent from Outagamie County to Brown County to help with the ballot counting, a spokesperson said. Interesting. So, aside from that, still in Wisconsin, watch live. Wisconsin top official discusses recount. Insane turnout numbers, and we discussed that here a little bit yesterday as well. The fact that Wisconsin and even Minnesota getting drug into this, which we've not really talked a lot about, have picked up substantially the number of voters in this election compared to elections in, say, 2018, 2016, 2014. I think the numbers went back to all the way back to 2012, if I'm not mistaken. So let's take a brief listen to this.
The election very seriously. Election law is complex. It's our job as election administrators to not just understand and implement the law with precision, but it's also our job to explain the nuances of elections to the public in a way that's approachable. As election administrators, we don't write the law. We can't change the law, the process.
They don't change law or the process, but they sure find ways to circumvent the processes, don't they? I wonder if they tell that to their favored ballot workers and counters net behind the scenes. Interesting. So over to American Lookout, Wall Street Journal writer reported voter turnout in Wisconsin is not feasible. Yeah, absolutely. It's insane. Have you noticed that some states are reporting massive voter turnout? In some places, the numbers are so high that they don't even make sense. Kim Strassel, the Wall Street Journal, did a deep dive into the numbers in Wisconsin, and they just aren't realistic at all. Says here are the numbers. Harlan Z. Hill says Wisconsin has 3,684,726 active registered voters. They counted 3,288,771 votes. That's a bit unbelievable. 89% turnout? Okay, sure. This is what Kim Strassel said via the thread reader. Says, I am legitimately interested / confused by this. I checked, and the top number is indeed Wisconsin's active registered voter number as of November 1st. The bottom is approximately what has been counted. That is not feasible, 89% turnout. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel is claiming a 71% state turnout. I'm not sure where it gets this, but that would make more sense given even populous Milwaukee didn't exceed 83% turnout. And Dane, lower, do math on what rest of state would need to bump up state average to 89. True, Wisconsin has same-day voter registration, but to be at 71%, Wisconsin would have yesterday needed 900,000 same-day registrations. If I'm doing my math wrong, please tell me. 3,288,771 divided by 4.588 million equals about 71%. 4,588,000 minus 3.684 equals about 900,000. Is that possible / conceivable? That would be akin to increasing Wisconsin's registered voting population by up to 30% in one day. It would also suggest that if those same day registrations hadn't happened, Wisconsin would have had a ridiculously low turnout. This looks like fraud, plain and simple. Captain Tucker tweet says, wow, a 150,000 Biden vote to 0. Trump vote ballot drop in Michigan this morning. Nothing to see in the dark overnight hours of election 2020. Add this to the Wisconsin 200,000 Biden vote jump at 5 a.m. and we have probable voter fraud. See chart. And of course, we've referenced this over the last couple of days as well. The mysterious dark of night jump where none of the votes magically increased POTUS's count, but certainly did to Mr. Biden. So, yeah, it's unfeasible at this point and is probably rife with fraud. So that pretty well rounds out the goings on with the states in question. There are probably things going on in other states. I have only elected to capture those since the elections here now on the 3rd. The Nevadas, the Arizonas, the Georgias, North Carolinas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I'm sure there's probably others out there. I could probably do a whole stinking show on some of the anomalies and BS found in all the other states as well. But nonetheless, this thing is going to be contested, and regardless of what the Mockingbird media, regardless of what big tech tries to purport, put their little fact checkers underneath the video descriptions, etc., it's all malarkey. All of it. And it's going to get contested. It's going to get overturned. And the rightful winner will be declared. So out of the boards here today, just take a quick round tripper through that. Hashtag Stop the Steal is the hashtag that we're going to be using for all of this. You'll see that in the description of the video here today. You guys can use that as well as you share this information out. James O'Keefe at James O'Keefe we are processing every voter fraud and election integrity tip that comes in. And of course, yesterday on the broadcast, we talked and saw a little bit of that from folks at the mailing stations, the USPS, taking direction from their superiors. James O'Keefe even called up the supervisor and went to question him, and he hung up on him. So what does that tell you? And again, the thing that I question is if it happened there, how many other places did that happen at? A Trump tweet thread. This is what we know about voter fraud. Hold the line, the Pledge of Allegiance, talking about some of the notables and non opines about ballot chain of custody. Yes, obviously, we're some of the articles now that we've gone through today suggests that the numbers don't match with what they finalized versus where they ended up when they hand carried this stuff. Why is comms attacking the watermark ballot so hard? And so, yes, that lends itself to that article I was kind of circling up top of the Zero Hedge about this theory that perhaps a lot of these ballots have some watermarks on them and that all these fraudulent ballots coming in probably do not. They will likely all get confiscated and recounted and the rightful winner determined and the fraud exposed. Says I laughed my ass off. This is an epic tweet by Maria Bartiromo. Don't listen to haters. All right. I apparently missed that, but hey, BLM is a Jewish terror group. All right. Well, whatever. Comms doesn't like Anons going around their censorship. Of course not. And I'm assuming what they're talking about is the likes of Facebook and Twitter, who have pretty well ratcheted things down as of late. Biden vote fraud. Yeah, goes without saying. Arizona rally at Maricopa County Courthouse at noon today. And we did talk about that yesterday. Hopefully, if you're out west, you get the opportunity to go out there. I think there are going to be more rallies in subsequent days at many of these states. So keep an eye on that from the same outfit that is putting that together. I did see some notes on that here in the last 24 hours. Fox 13, Utah Attorney General says election process has been compromised. Will take personal leave to help Trump. Yeah, you think? Uh, Updated and clean dough waiting for Patriot Baker. All right. Andrew Breitbart, War, Murdoch, and the rest of the MSM are the enemy of the people. And I think that pretty well goes without saying at this point. Exposure lies, no violence, just truth. Election fraud compilation. Yeah, we're doing our part here to do the same. And again, folks, I might remind you that I am only showing you a small snippet of the stuff and that I've been coming across. Uh, I've got my own personal little war room and that going on where folks can contribute. Those who know what I'm talking about, you guys are more than welcome to continue to contribute with whatever bits of information you guys find. This will all indeed be archived and ready. Who knows? This stuff may end up in a court of law as evidence before it's said and done. Who knows? Watch the watermark. Interesting theory. Report voter fraud. Yes, there's a number of hotlines in that. You can go back on the channel here in subsequent days where we highlighted that. Biden campaign is talking crap. Non-supporters, non-note buns to go around. Calm censorship. Yep. Stop the steal spreads across the internet after infecting Facebook. And I'm sure they had to quash that. Watch the watermark again. Calls to dig on Vote America. So Vote America, perhaps that's one of the voting machine companies out there or those that process it. Nancy Pelosi calls President Donald Trump a domestic enemy and refers to Biden as president-elect. Well, no surprise there. Watch. Nancy Pelosi calls President Trump a Democratic enemy. All right. So apparently there's video of that or on a tweet. Quantum financial system, QFS, and the blockchain. And yes, I did see something in that regard here posted on video site here recently. I think that was actually over at Tiger Network, if I'm not mistaken. Interesting. Again, one thing to keep in mind out of all this, folks. Yes, as painful as it is for this stuff to watch, as painful as it is to see all of this fraud being exposed, that they think that they're going to steal this election. This is all still cover for what is going on behind the scenes that they really do not want you to look at, along with the COVID shenanigans, but the Great Reset, where they are going to swoop in the Davos types, the World Economic Forum types, and just introduce a new system to do business under. Against our will, of course, but that's what they want us to play along with. Let's see. Anons, pray. Yes. Former White House official exposes plan to take down Trump. Plan to take down Trump. Couple times repeated in the boards today. They're digging on. Pennsylvania Republican state leaders say they will not step in. Contact them today. Clark County kicks out GOP watchers and covers the windows, all at 4 a.m. How convenient. This is interesting. Internet sleuths were using Michigan government website to check for dead voters, so the website was shut down. Oh, we can't have too many people digging on what was supposed to be public information. Dig. Pennsylvania 2020 general election mail ballot request data set. The new federal agency nobody knows about. Quantum dots for experimental anti-fraud labeling. Dear God, let's hope not. Let's see, lawsuit, at least 21,000 dead people on Pennsylvania voter rolls. Yeah, so again, talking about the Nevada stuff is certainly going to have implications across the country. Justice Department OKs armed officers investigating fraud at ballot counting sites. Yeah, we'll see how well that works out. Just in, the Associated Press says Pennsylvania is likely to go to a recount. Gee, you think? Breaking. Pennsylvania Dems create nearly 700,000 votes to put Joe Biden in lead since election. Yep, we covered that here. Justice Department looking into allegations of voter fraud in Nevada after Trump legal team identifies thousands of illegal votes. Yep, covered that one as well. And we don't care who you supported. If you have anything, let us know. From suppression to questions, that's our job, no matter who it helps. So, bottom line, at the end of the day, it's time to finish this. Let's continue to expose the fraud. Let's get it out on the socials, bypass the censorship, whatever means, ways we have to do that. And oh, by the way, in case you missed it last night, I did a show on the Battle of Athens. And what happens when we discover fraud and corruption so bad and so pervasive? What happens? Well, as history might tell us, back in 1946, there was this little battle called the Battle of Athens down in Athens, Tennessee. and I did a read on the history of that particular battle when the GIs came home from World War II and discovered the BS that was going on in this particular county, and they took action. Am I promoting that here today? No, but I would encourage folks to understand history. You can check that out over on the Tiger Network, or you can check that out on my page over on UGEtube for the reading through that. All right. Well, that is going to do it for today's midday update. Don't know if we'll have more here a little bit later on today. Pixels might have another upload here or live show with Stormwatch. We'll have to see. But nonetheless, keep your head on a swivel, folks. This thing is far from over. Be of good cheer. We are on the winning side. This stuff will be exposed and corrected. So with that, take care. God bless everybody.